Well, look, I have to be honest from the outset and say that the movie for me is a disappointment. That doesn't mean it's not without without qualities. So let's look at the good stuff first. On a casting level, it is really smart. We've said this since the film was first cast. I think Toby Jones is really good as Mannering because he manages to bring to the pompous character of Mannering both slapstick and pathos. When it was interesting in the interview when you were trying to get him to talk about the fact that he'd been to Lecoq to study, and actually that's what you meant about sort of clowning skills, because that was it's so much to do with physical performance, and I think you can tell that. And there is some slapstick in there, but there is also pathos, which there needs to be for that character to work. I think Michael Gambon as Private Godfrey it just doesn't miss a note. It's a really, really lovely, as he said himself, basically what Godfrey does is sort of dodders around and is a little bit out of touch with everything. And Gambon brings this real wistful charm to that. And there's a couple of moments when there is one brilliant moment when they start talking about Berlin, and he's just, and he is, and I think that's very, very charming. I also think that Tom Courtenay as Lance Corporal Jones does, I think that what they do is they draw on what's on the small screen and expand it slightly, but essentially stay true to the original. So I think on that level, there is much to like. The problems, and there are big problems. Firstly, I think as far as the script is concerned, I don't think it has anything like the verbal wit and dexterity that those Croft and Perry scripts had. Weirdly enough, the script does a strange thing, which is, Toby was talking about, expanding something out for a movie, which of course, we have had a Dad's Army movie before from, whenever it was, 71. And it is true that when you take a sitcom and you expand it out into movies, you think, okay, well, we have to broaden the action. And that's always a problem, because often what makes sitcoms work is the enclosure, the fact that it's people in an enclosed space, not very much. And actually, in the case of Dad's Army, the real joy of it was that they didn't do very much. They would practice rifles, but they'd only have a broom, or they'd have one rifle. And, there'd be great plans, but not much would happen. What the script does, weirdly enough, is gives the cast both too much and too little to do at the same time. So on the one hand, there's a lot of plot. There's a Nazi spy, and it's Catherine Zeta-Jones' character, and she's apparently writing an article for the Lady magazine, and this appears to be a reference to that episode Mum's Army, in which Mannering gets his head turned by another woman comes in, and then there's the D-Day landings are coming up, and then there's possibilities. There's a lot of business going on, business which I felt didn't serve the characters as well as it could have done. And then in terms of the characters themselves, there were many occasions when I felt like we're getting crowbarred in catchphrases as opposed to what you really ought to have, which is just that very sort of small, intimate bickering, which is really what Dad's Army was about. The Fighting Tigers, when it was a group of people bickering in a small room, but in a way which each one of them played up the role that they had in British culture. So it was this series of sort of thumbnail caricatures that were just charming and funny, but didn't really have much plot. The other problem I have to say is I think that the direction is quite heavy-footed. From the bull in a field opening to the sort of beach-bound finale, what it lacks is levity and bounce. And again, it's those two things together meant that there was a large section of the film, particularly the first half hour, in which it just wasn't delivering laughs in anything like the amount that they needed to be delivered. I think there are things that are positive. I think the fact that they've made an active effort to move the women characters more centre stage is admirably intentioned, if not entirely successfully pulled off. But I think good for them for at least trying to change the format slightly. The idea that Captain Mannering's wife actually comes down from the stairs and exists as
you actually see her.
Yeah, and she's very well played by Tracy Mossingham, who does a very good job. But I think it does it comes down to two things. On the one hand, there is always the problem when you expand anything from a small setting into the wider canvas of cinema, that quite often you lose something in the mix. There are examples which are different. Funnily enough, somebody flagged up the Porridge movie, but I was talking to somebody else about the Porridge movie. It's actually not bad, but there are many examples of British sitcoms which were turned into movies, particularly around the 1970s, in which the humour got lost because they went out of the original setting. But I think the greater problem is that the script and the direction aren't sharp or or even whimsical enough to allow the cast to really shine. So what you get is a collection of really terrific actors playing characters that you love, and occasionally, in the moments that it gets it right, you get this lovely sort of warm, nostalgic feeling and laughter at the same time. But for too much of it, there was too much scaffolding, too much furniture, too much narrative business, and that just, for me, didn't have the charm, didn't have the wit, didn't have the integrity of the original Dad's Army. So it's not without things to like, and I suspect that loads of people will go and see it. But I must confess that when you look at the quality of that cast, I thought the movie itself was a disappointment.